Die Ressource Zeit spielt auch heute und hier eine Rolle. Und ich bitte jetzt Ruby Sircar zu mir, auch eben passend zum Thema, warum wir alle Familie sind. Also Ruby ist eine alte Bekannte, oder wir sind schon seit vielen,
Extended Family.
Genau, seit vielen Jahren miteinander bekannt und haben auch schon miteinander gearbeitet. Insbesondere 2012, ist schon viele Jahre her, im Rahmen einer Ausstellung auf der Akademie der Bildenden Künste, wo Ruby Sircar Dozentin ist an der Akademie der Bildenden Künste Entschuldige?
Nur Senior Artist.
Senior Artist ist auf der Akademie der Bildenden Künste im Fachbereich für kontextuelle Malerei. Und mit dem Fachbereich kontextuelle Malerei an der Akademie der Bildenden Künste machen wir auch den nächsten Programmpunkt, nämlich die Performative Lecture von Tejal Shah. Und Ruby wird ich fand es eben so schön, dass man da auch nochmal anschließt an diese gemeinsame Arbeit von 2012, habe dich eingeladen, dass du jetzt Tejal Shah vorstellst, und Ruby wird dann auch im Anschluss das Gespräch mit Tejal Shah moderieren, und ich bedanke mich bei dir und übergebe an dich und heiße dich willkommen.
Ja, danke Christiane für die... Okay, I'll swap to English now. So thank you, Christiane, for the invitation and also inviting the Academy of Fine Arts, who was also represented today already through Elisabeth Samsonov, who had the first keynote here. And Christiane invited Tejal Shah here this year, and she asked us to share the host for your invitation. And it's my great pleasure to have you again in Vienna. And Tejal Shah is an artist. Some of you might have already been present last night when her video or film project was shown, a film project that's from 2012 from the Dan Documenta. And if you have had the pleasure of watching the film last night, it actually starts stretching out from queer politics in India all the way through ecofeminism, which we have been discussing today already from a South Asian perspective, as well as including other practices, going all the way to the non-dual theory or philosophy of the middle way Buddhism, which you'll introduce today. And next week, you're all very welcome. It's an open workshop at the Academy on Tuesday, 3rd of December, where Tejal Shah will focus even more and share more of her practices, artistic as well as philosophical practices with us between 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. At Kurzbauergasse, Project Room 1. So thank you very much for coming, and I'll right away hand over to Tejal.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruby, and thank you also to the organizers for inviting me. So I want to start by saying that what I'm sharing with you, I'm actually sharing as a student, would share with a friend. And so it's done in the spirit of friendship. And everything that I'm going to share with you, there's absolutely nothing original that I'm sharing. Actually, it's all plagiarized. So I want to make that very clear from the beginning. And so many times you will hear me using the word mind. And when I use the word mind, I mean the heart-mind, not just the mind, but the heart-mind. And I might even use it synonymously with consciousness. So before we begin, no, not before we begin, because we've already begun, I invite all of you to stand up and come in the space at the back. So just join me. Being very spontaneous. So we're just going to do something together. Hopefully it won't take very long, but I just saw that I had this free space and I could do it, so I'm going to try it out. I never did it with so many people, but it's exciting. Okay, so please requesting everybody to join if you want. If you don't want, you don't have to. But it's most fun to join in and not just watch from the outside. Okay, so what we're going to do is, each one of us are mentally, without showing anything outwardly, you're going to mentally choose 2 people from this circle. So please, I invite everybody to come so you can all see each other, whoever wants to participate in this exercise. Would you like to join or? Okay, no problem. So you will mentally choose 2 people. You don't tell these 2 people, hey, I'm choosing you. You just mentally choose these 2 people. And then you're going to try to stand in the space in such a way that you create an equilateral triangle with those 2 people. Are the instructions clear? Any doubts, anybody? Okay, so you just have to stand in the space so that you make a triangle, an equilateral triangle. So if I had choose both of you, I kind of stand like this and I make a triangle, yeah? So without saying anything to anyone, we're just going to engage in this exercise. Thank you. That came to a standstill pretty fast, given how many number of people we were. So, okay, come back. And I just request you to maybe be closer to the front. I invite you to sit more intimately close to each other in the front, because normally I don't like to look at a piece of paper when I talk, but unfortunately I must today, and I have no images to show. So I'm so afraid some of you are going to fall asleep. So please, I just invite you to come closer. Thank you. Okay. So actually, this is an exercise from a feminist choreographer, and it's obviously an exercise in interconnectedness, in having an embodied experience of the fact that we are all connected, and when we are connected, we mutually affect each other in every moment and simultaneously. So I am affected by you and you are affected by me. So just a quick introduction on the major theme of my talk today. Okay. All right, so we agree that all the major problems of the world have been created by some humans, and hence these problems should be also solved by humans. In this context, I'm going to share with you a proposition, and I call this proposition the Vision of Unbecoming. It's the Vision of Unbecoming, and this vision is founded on the premise that there is a basic human goodness and wisdom in each one of us, and this basic goodness or wisdom can help to solve the world's problems. I know that's a big statement to make, but I mean it. This wisdom does not belong to any one culture or religion. It does not come from the West or from the East. Rather, it is a tradition of human warriorship that has existed in many cultures and at many times throughout history. So again, I choose the word warriorship, which should raise eyebrows for some people, but it will be explained in due course why I choose that word. When I say human beings are basically good, I mean that we have every faculty that we need so that we don't have to keep fighting with the world. This is what I mean by the basic human goodness. It means that we are capable of understanding reality, and it also means that we have a mind and a body, and we have a choice to uplift ourselves in order to work with reality in a dignified and humorous way. We can handle our universe properly and fully in an uplifted fashion with dignity. So this basic goodness it's a goodness that is beyond the good and the bad. It's not the good which is the opposite of bad. It's not for or against. So, because we have this basic goodness, we are capable of creating an enlightened society, an awakened society. So the question is how? The heart mind, our consciousness, is fundamentally more powerful than any other phenomena in the world, more powerful than nuclear energy. In the vision of unbecoming, weapons and systems of destruction and degeneration are not only man-made, they are mind-made. And because they are made by the mind, i.e. the human mind, they can also be unmade by the human mind. The true nature of the mind or our consciousness is actually like the sun. It's very clear and it can shine infinitely to every atom of the universe. So in a way it's like, imagine you put, a ceramic lamp around the sun and the light just can't shine through, but you just drill some holes into this pot or crack it open, and the light shines through brilliantly everywhere, unhindered. So in the perspective of unbecoming, the reality is non-dual, which is to say that all phenomena in the universe are dependent co-arisings or mutually interdependently originated. When the duality of the subject and object dissolves completely, there is a capacity to know all phenomena simultaneously. And I'm not being poetic here. I actually mean what I'm saying. And it's not just some, spiritual mumbo jumbo. But I would like you to reflect for a moment that if all boundaries between self and other collapse completely and fully, then there is no basis for any aggression or anger. There's no friction. So when this basic goodness is fully uncovered, we find that we are endowed with capacities of infinite wisdom, infinite love, compassion, and power. So this is the potential that each one of us is carrying. So what I'm saying is our basic work, regardless of whatever outer vocation that we pursue, is the work of becoming fully human beings. and inspiring full human beingness in other people who feel starved about their lives. And when I say becoming a human being, I don't mean simply a person who walks, eats, sleeps, but also somebody who can experience a state of wakefulness. Only when we are awake and directly experience the fullness of our potential, then we are in a position to create an awakened community. The important thing is to realize that we are never off duty. We cannot just relax because the whole world needs help. This may seem very demanding at first, but basic wakefulness is actually very close to us. We can directly experience it, and not only that, we're touching upon it all the time. Eventually, we will come to discover that we don't need to possess this basic wakefulness. We are it. So in the unbecoming vision, which is a centuries-old idea, serving the world can save the world, but saving the world is not the only point. The point is also to create an awakened community. So in this presentation, I'm going to just try and share this ground of this awakened community and a possible path towards it. And I don't share it as a utopian fabulation, actually. I actually present it as something which can be a very personal experience that we can all undertake. So it's not a theorization or a speculation, but something we can individually experience, and then we have to decide how we're going to co-create this awakened community. So the key to warriorship, the first principle of the unbecoming vision, is not being afraid of who you are. Ultimately, the unbecoming vision teaches that in the face of the world's great problems, we can be courageous and kind at the same time. And this is quite the opposite of being selfish. When we are afraid of ourselves and afraid of the seeming threat the world outside us presents, then we become extremely selfish. So fear makes us selfish. We want to build our own little nests or our cocoons, and we want to live by ourselves in a secure way. But the fact is that we can be much, much more brave than that. So we have to think beyond our secure jobs and our homes and sending children to school or waking up in the morning and going to work, or about the fireplace burning in the house. We have to think about how we can help the world, because if we don't help it, nobody else is going to. And in order to help the world, it doesn't mean, I have to become the mayor of my city tomorrow. You can start with the people around you, your friends, your family. In fact, you can start with yourself. So how do we start with the self, and what is this full human beingness? And so this full human beingness that I'm going to talk about is actually the interdependent individual. What is this interdependent individual? So I want you to just take a moment, sit upright, just sit upright. You can even close your eyes, but just, paying attention to what I'm saying, because attention comes from attending to, and attending to comes from tending, and we can tend to things with awareness and care and love and respect. So just take a moment, close your eyes, back upright, and I'm just going to say some things and follow through. Just contemplate what I'm about to say. Start by observing how everything in life happens due to the coming together of various causes and conditions. Observe how your own experiences of happiness and suffering are closely connected to the happiness and suffering of others. For example, if the first thing in the morning you wake up and you encounter somebody who's in a really foul mood, just see how that changes the tenor of your day. So you depend on other people's moods. Your own sense of well-being depends on them. And take a moment to reflect that when you say I, what comes to the mind? Do you see yourself as somebody very solid, as an independent entity, as something, a discrete, autonomous person? I exist. So if I asked you, where exactly is this I that you are referring to? What is it in you which is this I? Is it your body? Is it your mind? Where is this I? If you say, yes, my body is the I, but then your body came from the cells and materials of your parents, and your parents are not you, and those cells don't belong to you. And then you have been fed a lot of food throughout your life. None of that food is you. And there were many people who produced this food, and they are not you. And the production of the food needed sunlight and plants and insects and water and soil, and none of those things are you either. So where is this I that you feel is so independently, truly existing there? In reality, there is no separate you, because everything that you are actually comes from what you call others. Your body exists due to causes that are completely other than you. You cannot point to the body and say, this is me, because there is no you there. You didn't find anything which was exclusively me in this body. There is nothing uniquely your own. So what you consider as this I, where is that really? And if you say my mind is the I, you don't say I am mind, you say I have a mind. If you were mind, you should say I am mind. But you don't say that. So there is a I, which is supposedly separate from the mind, but we are looking for it and we can't seem to find it. And this mind does not have a gender or a nationality or an ethnicity. But when you think of I, this I comes with some gender, some nationality, some ethnicity, some sexual orientation. So where is this I? This I obviously has to be located somewhere within the mind-body complex. But having examined almost 100% of this mind-body complex, there is nothing that you can pinpoint as exclusively the I. This complete self, where is it? You can open your eyes slowly. So it may seem very simple at one level, but I think it's very important to ask ourselves that we live with this very tight notion that I exists as an independent entity. And even though we may say that no, everything exists interdependently, and so does the I exist interdependently, the question is that if we look really for this I, we don't find it. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many, there is a cognitive error. There is a gap between what the reality is and how we perceive the reality to be, not just in a theoretical way, but in an embodied way, how we act in the world. We don't act in the world thinking, yes, I mean, of course I'm making a generalization, maybe you are a very highly realized person who does act in the world as an interdependent individual, but that's not how we act out in a very sort of primal way. So there's a very deeply ingrained ignorance about this self as existing independently. But when you do a simple analysis, you find out that, gosh, there's nothing I can pinpoint as the self. Everything about me is actually the other. There is no self, which I can claim as being the self. So then the question arises, so what I want to say is that this kind, I mean, I cannot do a lot in the short time I have here. This will be expanded much more in the workshop. But we can take these kind of analytical, contemplative exercises and we can do them and we can keep looking and looking. And when you experientially really understand and touch upon the reality that yes, there is a complete absence of this independent self. There is no such thing as an independent self. There is only a dependent self. Actually, you will have very strong, even physiological experiences that you will undergo. Because suddenly the very basis of reality, of how we think of ourselves, shifts. Then comes the question of mine. What we consider as mine. So, you know, just a very simple exercise. Imagine you go to a shop, for example, to buy a watch. What is your reaction to that watch before you have bought it and after you buy it? So if the watch gets damaged by mistake before you have bought it, what is your reaction? And what is your reaction to the watch after you become the so-called owner of that watch, where it has become my watch? So when we do these kind of simple analysis, we see that actually we have a very strong adherence to an independent I who possesses the my house, my friends, my belongings, my body, my mind. Until this is not dismantled from the very core and there isn't an actual cognitive and affective paradigm shift, then doing something for others, so-called others, whether they're other human beings or sentient beings or planetary things such as the air, water, sunlight, soil, it's almost like, oh, I have to do it. I should do it. Oh, I ought to do it, it is my duty to do it. No, the energy is very different. But when you have the sense that doing something for the other is actually doing something for myself, because the other is the self and the self is the other, that's when a kind of tectonic shift takes place. A joy comes because it's no longer an effort about doing something about somebody else. This is how our psychology works, that it seems to be very easy for us to work for our own benefit, but at some point we may get burnt out when we work for the benefit of others, because the boundary of the self and other is maintained intact in that relationship. So until that boundary does not collapse, but once it does collapse, it's not so, I mean, I'm actually talking about practices, cognitive and affective practices and exercises, which have to, contemplative, analytical practices that have to be done on a daily basis to shift the scale of how we at a very visceral level interact with the world and understand our place in the world. In this vision of unbecoming, what is the meaning of independence? This interdependent individual, how can it be independent? Independence does not mean that I can do whatever I want, when I want, how I want, and how I like it. No. There's a radical redefinition of independence. Independence comes to mean that I or we are able to direct the actions of our mind, of our body, and of our speech in such a way that we are aligned with the wisdom of interdependent co-arising and the affection or sense of closeness that arises from that. When we understand that all phenomena are interdependent co-arising, then we undergo this paradigm shift. And then the real meaning of independence emerges, that when I'm able to act, to think, to use my body and my speech in such a way that it can be mutually beneficial for me, for all sentient beings, and for the ecologies that we all inhabit together. We will not be able to manifest this perfectly overnight, of course not, but we can begin to make a motivation. We can start by setting a very different kind of intention or motivation as we move through this tiny existence that we have, this very small fleeting life on this planet, that whatever I do, I try to do it with the intention of keeping in mind that this respect and love and dignity and care, which I want so badly, is exactly what every other being also wants. I just want to check, how am I doing on time?
Good.
Okay, very good. So, this motivation or intention setting is what will help to start working towards creating an enlightened society, because it is about creating intentional communities. And for such communities to be genuinely beneficial, our intentions would have to be well thought out, having taken into consideration the consequences of all our actions in deep time and in deep space, so that there is a profundity and a vastness that is brought into consideration in every step. One of the ways to really start this process is simply by bringing a quality of awareness to everything that we do, so that we just don't do things mindlessly, because we understand that there is this fundamental interdependent arising. With this quality of awareness, we begin to manifest actions into the world. And by actions, I don't mean just outward actions, but our mental intentions are also forms of action. And this, to make us do this responsibly, one of the methods or systems which is outlined in ancient wisdom traditions is a 3-step process, which is called view, meditation, and action. And meditation, I feel, is a very overused and bastardized word. I rather prefer the translation, instead of meditation, actually, when you look into the Sanskrit and the Tibetan terms, how it's used is, it's habituation or familiarization. Any kind of system or process that you engage with to kind of change your habit-forming energies. That is what meditation is understood as. So view, meditation, and action. So what is the view? The view, so basically because we're working with this kind of cognitive and affective error, where there is the I, which is independent rather than interdependent, and that this I is somehow more important than others. Like when push comes to shove, somehow I am more important, I want this. So that's the kind of affective error that we are working with. So the view is the metaphysical perspective. It's an investigation of the ultimate nature of things, of the phenomenal world, and of our mind? What is the mode of existence of this? And based, when you develop an understanding of this view, then you also develop certain attitudes towards others in the world based on this view. And the meditation, which I already said, is a process of familiarization with this view. And so this familiarization happens in two phases. One would be, let's say, a more formal practice, where you actually use a lot of different forms of analysis to obtain this view again and again. So, for example, if I told, when we think of impermanence, for example, we think of impermanence as in, you look at me and you know at some point I'm going to die. So I'm impermanent, you know, I'm not going to be here. And impermanence also has the connotation that there is change happening, you know. I was different when I was 10 years old. I'm different right now. And if I continue to live longer, then the future version of me. So there's a kind of process of change which is happening. But in this system, what is really emphasized is subtle impermanence. So how we understand impermanence is seen as a very gross understanding of impermanence. And the subtle impermanence is that there is a change happening moment by moment by moment. And we know this from science. For example, if you looked at me with an electron microscope, you would just see a whole bunch of atoms moving around in space very rapidly, and you would look at that and say, oh yeah, she's changing all the time, momentarily, very, very fast. So this knowledge of subtle impermanence is not something which is evident to our sense consciousnesses. It's something that you have to use some analysis and infer that. So the process of familiarization of the meditation formal practice is about habituating with the view. And then there is the action, which is the expression in the outer world of this inner knowledge, which is acquired through the view and the familiarization. It's a matter of applying and maintaining that knowledge in all circumstances, and that's where the ethics emerge. And the ethics are not understood as a set of rules that you have to follow, but you yourself undergo an entire value system change, and then you're able to act effortlessly, ethically in the world. There are many other, I wanted to actually share some very practical, hands-on things, like what kind of ideas are present which can change the way we act in the world. So one is this idea of seeing everybody as your beneficiary, that when you really understand that all the sentient beings, they benefit me all the time, because whatever that they are doing is because of that I can be, because it's a dance of mutual interdependency. Also, another point is that very often we emphasize a lot about the differences between ourselves. But in the vision of unbecoming, what is emphasized is actually the commonality without flattening out the differences. And the commonality being this very basic level where we can see that all the sentient beings, they all want some form of happiness. I know it's a very, but even you touch an ant, you know, and the ant almost immediately either scurries away because it feels some threat, or it might even pretend to be dead, because even this ant actually is looking for safety, which is not very different from what you and I are looking for in our lives. And all the sentient beings, no matter who they are also trying to avoid forms of disturbance and suffering. And that's the same with us, you know. In fact, if you notice, every single movement that you might make in your life, whether it could be moving your fingers or blinking your eyes, even the slightest movement that we commit it because somehow it contributes to some comfort in us. I feel comfortable, I feel better. This makes me more at ease. So there's a kind of mental ease that we look for. So this is the common ground that we share with each and every sentient being. And if you walked around the world looking at all the beings through this lens, rather than the lens of, oh, you are a different nationality and a different color and a different gender and a different sexuality and a different color of hair and a different color of eyes, or, you know, you have 10 legs and not 2. It just goes on and on. So how can the walls come down and a genuine sense of affection flow towards everyone despite all the problems and differences? Now, this is not done to somehow have an outward beatific appearance, but it's done because when you have to act in situations, because we're always acting in relation, and if you want to act responsibly in relation, if you have a calm mind, which is at ease, no matter how difficult the situation in front of you, you're able to make a better decision, keeping the whole loop of cause and effect in mind as you make those decisions. So this is just another technique. The other very interesting point that I found is that there is a segregation between, a separation made between the person and the actions they do. In the sense that nobody is fundamentally or inherently good or bad. They are circumstantially, due to many causes and conditions coming together, people may commit unethical or injustice or inviolence. But when we glue the person and the action together, then the rage or the feeling of injustice that comes towards the person. And we mix the person and the action that they have done. And the system says, no, you can separate the person from the action, which means that you can condemn the action, and you should condemn the action if there is some kind of injustice or violence, but you don't have to condemn the person in a way that there is no chance for the person to change and manifest something differently. So this becomes also very important in seeing that in our day-to-day lives, when we act in relations, if we are able to create that separation between the person and the action, how are we able to work in a beneficial manner in that situation? I also want to address the question of natural, of what we consider natural. And natural in this vision is just a question of habituation. There is no inherent natural, but whoever is more familiarized with or used to becomes more natural in their eyes. There is a quote by a Fluxus artist, Robert Filou, who happened to also have died living the last 3 years of his life in a Buddhist monastery, and I really like this quote, so I want to share it with you. The quote says, "Art is what makes life more interesting than art." Art is what makes life more interesting than art. So since we are here thinking about life and how to live a good life, a life of coexistence, a life where we all can be family, I will end by one more quote to support or kind of piggyback on Robert Filou's statement. It says that, so the everyday practice is simply to develop a complete acceptance and openness to all situations and emotions and all people and beings, experiencing everything totally, without reservations or blockages, so that one never withdraws or centralizes into oneself. This is why we practice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tejal, and I will hand over the microphone to Ruby.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So before I begin with my questions, are there any immediate questions from the audience?
Before questions from the audience, I just want to say one thing, that actually there are certain exercises which cannot be done in a very short period of time, but they are fundamental to really realizing this view of interdependence. Like it does not have to be a theoretical knowledge. It can become something very felt and embodied, and it's something I hope to share at the workshop. So when I close the quote by saying that you never centralize into yourself, it's talking about never centralizing into this idea of an independent self. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to begin actually with the interdependency. Are there any questions, sorry, from the audience? Okay. You started by saying that you will, the talk consists or exists out of many, or out of plagiarism, and I really liked it when then you dived or dipped into talking about the interdependence of the I, and which was just a repetition of what you began with. So maybe would you care to talk a bit about plagiarism and the interdependence on thought as well as the production of reality in that sense? Yeah.
Actually, I feel that there is a certain kind of colonization of knowledge and knowledge systems, and it has to be looked at, because many times when these ideas of interdependency are being spoken about, and they're quite hot topics right now, one has to also understand that they have a very deep root in philosophical traditions, which are living practice traditions, which are very much alive today. And we cannot, it would be good if we don't, if we're able to engage those living practices when we speak about interdependence and interdependent origination. Because I feel that the main problem we are facing in the world today is this gap between, yes, we know we are interdependent, but that knowledge is not able to transform our behavior and action. And I feel that that gap is because we don't have the tools we don't have the tools to make it embodied. No, I'm saying a generalization. Of course, I'm not saying nobody has the tools, or but many times those tools are missing. Yeah. And these tools are very easily and prevalently available in a vast diversity as practices within many non-dual contemplative traditions, which I said, they're living philosophical and practice traditions. It's not some dead knowledge in some books, written by someone. People are manifesting these cognitive and affective transformed qualities. So, yeah.
Yeah, I therefore always, not sorry, always, but I also enjoyed very much when Elisabeth von Samsonov began with the triangle, which she undid into a square, and then you came back to the triangle, but actually led it into a circle. So I was enjoying very much today, and also you went into circles when the way you would refer to the living structure or the lived everyday in your housing project. So I very much enjoyed that, and I would also like to ask you a bit about the various geometric forms that you were using here today for that little startup or warm-up round in the back, going into those, because they all have meaning as being reproduced, and they all depend on each other also. So,
I mean, as I said earlier, the exercise is actually also plagiarized. There's nothing original in that, but I don't know. I wasn't thinking so much about the circle or triangle. For me, it was more like there was such a simple exercise to feel this interdependence. And usually I've only done it in a group of maybe 15 people. And it takes a while for the group to settle. And it's quite funny and interesting that, you know, you can very simply get this sense of that, of course, you know, this whole dynamic is this interplay of interconnectedness. But, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was more comment right now, but it just felt that even today's presentations were so interconnected and interdependent with each other. Yeah, that I really enjoyed it, and now the circle that you closed again,
and hopefully the next person will open it again. And I'm sorry, but Elizabeth's talk was not translated. Like, we missed the translations. I'm really sorry, but I think there could be many connections to draw, but I can't do that myself, so, yeah.
So very interesting, and I'm under the impression that at the moment, the way we perceive our own identity is heavily enforced or even manipulated by digital media and the way we represent ourselves or are encouraged to represent ourselves. And somehow I would be interested if you have any, like, what's your thought about this? Because it's like a second life in a way that drives us in a certain direction, maybe, and it's even saved forever. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on these digital phenomena.
You know, basically I mean, of course, you know, our entire society is changing because of digital media in unprecedented ways. But the point is, again and again, that if we're able to plug into our own awareness in a very fundamental way, then no matter what comes around to fragment that or to disconnect us, it will not have the power to do that. But for that, we have to gather the energy into, you know, because our energy is actually very fragmented. We don't use the power of our consciousness actually at all. When you look into contemplative traditions and what kind of mind training practices there are. So the sense of freedom, I mean, the sense of independence is not in, you know, your mind tells you do this or do that or check your phone or go online and do this. And we just kind of follow, you know. It's just like, okay, now I'll do this, now I'll do this. But when your real independence comes in a way when you say, no, I don't need to do that. And I have the control and the agency to say that I will not do that because I understand the whole dimension of, there is a kind of intention that you have set, you have certain, and then you understand the whole link of cause and effect, and you're able to express how you want to use that tool or technology. So I feel that technology, again, in itself, it's neither good or bad per se. It's how we use it and what we use it for that will determine, you know, its consequence. But again, this requires a form of, you know, all our bodily acts, our speech acts, like words can kill people. So if you know that, and then through that understanding, and you know that the other is you, it's you will then you start to train yourself to build the capacity to talk to the other in the way that you don't have to hurt them. You know, you don't have to let people die because of the words you use. So it's all about intentionality, a certain kind of training, and exercising a certain ability to guide your intentions and energies. So, of course, these technologies, if we're not really, you know, if we don't have these practices, we are just like, you know, going into all kinds of directions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sorry that you couldn't follow my talk. Maybe it's better for you. You never know. But what I want to bring up is I was really delving very deeply into the automatized structures of culture. And this is why I was also referring about the marriage rules as a certain logics of social cohesion and so on. Because I'm very much interested in the automatized parts of culture, because I think this is the biggest part. But I want to just mention something which for me was so touching when I came upon this. I did some research on, because we were talking about ecofeminism, and so I reread the early texts of ecofeminism, which were like published in a huge compilative work by Spretnak, and it's called actually a reading book on spiritual feminism, or I don't know, spiritualist feminism, however. And then you find out that these women were talking about magic a lot. They talk about magic. So whatever is this? And I found out that they were really thinking about re-establishing magic as like a technique of consciousness, because the first thing they do, they apply it on themselves. It's not about doing magic with the world, you know, I mean, make the president a frog or something, but really apply it on oneself in order to reach sort of enlightenment that implies exactly what you referred to. And this was for me so interesting, because I did it under the title of magic. So again, you know, it fell under bans of cultural bans. What are these women doing? Are they crazy? All these witches everywhere. But in a way, they were really doing something, what you also tried to do in a way. And this makes me a little bit worried that it is a technique of, how do you say, minor groups, powerless groups, that the first thing they do, they empower their consciousness. And I mean, this is what I'm seeing now, you know. So, because if it was a majority, you know, thinking like you propose, then no problem at all in the world, you know. So these women that really played a very minor role tried to introduce magic as a technique of, I mean, like optimize their consciousness. And I mean, this is really amazing. But I mean, I'm just worried that, I mean, the people who get this type of awareness, that creates a sort of predisposition to them to be even easier to be subdued. I mean, this is, because how do you deal with the, split of people that are aware and those that are not aware? I mean, those who give a damn about your awareness, and you sit in front of them and say, oh, you're part of mine, you know? And the other guy said, but just take your fucking territory or whatever, or your... I mean, I really exaggerate a lot now, you know? But it's only to give a short profile of my concern.
Thank you so much for your question. So actually, there are many layers to your question. And one of the things that I'll touch upon a lot later is, in my workshop, is that all the phenomena that we so-called perceive, not just the I. I did the exercise with deconstructing the I, but you can deconstruct anything and you will find that it's not there in the mode of an objective, independent existence. Nothing exists independently. But they appear as if they're independently existent. And in fact, in the non-dual philosophy, all of reality which is perceived is like an illusion. It's like a dream. And it's as good as magic or rainbow or a cloud or a mirage. So this understanding of what we consider, even in conventional terms, as an illusion, for example, a mirage, you can determine through cognitive processes that everything is like a mirage. And in that sense, all our bodies, all the presences of everything in the phenomenal world is illusory. And when you realize that it is actually illusory and it has no independent and inherent existence, it gives you a lot of power, because you realize that everything can be changed. Not just necessarily in a magical sense, but because you see very subtle layers of cause and effect that operate, and then you're able to change things which to a gross consciousness may look like magic. So that's one part. The other part is that it may seem or appear that it's falling into the trap of, working with one's own subjectivity. And that's why I said, it's not about idiot compassion. It's about a courageous compassion. So it's not like sitting and looking at the other person and saying, oh, you are me, even if the person is, going ahead and fracking your land and taking all the natural resources. That's not the point. And that's why the separation between the person and the action. So you are able to condemn the action, and you're able to make counteractions, but they are not driven from only a place of hate or seeing the person as inherently evil, because that person also has the chance to move from being currently evil to situationally in a different direction. And so I know this can seem problematic or whatever, but that's fine. Everybody is free to have their own positions. But when you, the whole process of the Mahayana Buddhist path, which is not just for your own benefit, for the benefit of others, the point is that if you are able to understand how your own mind works, how the cognitive and affective errors happen in your mind, and if you're able to create the transformation in yourself, like a little laboratory, then you can help others to do it in a very effective way. So the point is not stopping with yourself. If I had to stop with myself, then there's no point in even coming here and talking to others, because the whole point is to connect and share. So I don't know if that effectively answers, but yeah. I think one has to go much deeper in understanding the whole layout so that one understands that it's not so easily falling into this process that you are rightly pointing out. But I also feel that no matter what you do or in how you do, if there are so-called people who want to or have the power to silence you in that moment or even kill you and obliterate you, it's going to happen, right? It's like it is. But there's also, in this understanding of the non-dual, when we say thinking deep time and deep space, your life is not looked upon as just this one lifetime. It's, there is rebirth, there's continuation of consciousness. So it's not just, you are willing to even take the bullets, so to speak, because that fear is not there of losing the self per se. So there's a kind of different kind of power that arises. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Tejal, for today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to Karin Harase. Right? No?